Okay, can you imagine having a guitar lesson with Chuck Berry? Now, can you imagine having a guitar lesson with Chuck Berry if you were Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones and you weren't quite sure if you wanted one? Well, this very thing happened in 1986 during the filming of a rock and roll documentary called Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll. This totally bizarre and hilarious moment with Chuck Berry taking Keith Richards to school whilst Eric Clapton was watching. But it's also, fortunately for us, it's an amazing documented moment that has three of these guys unloading this barrage of the most archetypal licks you've ever heard. And it's almost like within the first 60 seconds, the three of them play everything you ever need to know about rock and roll. And we're going to break it down. There's double stops, arpeggios, hybrid scales, syncopation, it's all in there. So let's jump right in. So first of all, here's the scenario. You've got Chuck Berry, it's his 60th birthday celebration. You've got Keith Richards and Eric Clapton all rehearsing together. And then Chuck stops and he wants to have this jam session.
Working hard. We've been working hard. We've been working hard. All right. We have been working hard. Let's take a break. Let's take a break and jam a little bit.
So he opens up with that lick. That's the famous Chuck Berry intro lick, right? So it goes like this. Let me show you how to play it. Okay, so one of the interesting things about this lick is Chuck never really played it the same twice. I think he was really teaching us a lesson there, is that lick's not designed to be played the same every time you play it. But there's some kind of things that we can really learn from this lick. I've been obsessed with that lick ever since I was a little kid. And it's like ringing a bell, right? It's like the bugle call. It's like, I'm here, let's party. One of the things about Chuck Berry is it was originally Johnny Johnson, the amazing piano player Johnny Johnson, who played with Chuck Berry. It was his band originally that Chuck Berry joined. And like a lot of these licks, when you kind of break them down, they actually sound like piano licks. So, for example, if you take, the famous... that lick right there, there's so much cool stuff going on in that lick. And one of the big things about that whole idea is that Chuck Berry is using these syncopated rhythms where he's playing with the accent in the song. So he's playing basically these 3-against-4 rhythms. So the idea there is it's creating syncopation. And syncopation is basically where you're putting the accent on the offbeats, on the in-between beats. So in between the downbeats, right? And this is 16th notes, this song, right? You could say 8th notes if it's at a fast tempo. Like that, like a piano, right? But he's grouping it in groups of 3, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that, right? And if you're talking about it, say it's 8th notes, there's 8 in a bar, and this first lick here is 9 notes, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like that. But a better way to think of it is like this. Think of it as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, like that. So that's much more helpful because then you get the timing of it. It's like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. And that last note there, the 9th note of that lick, is the beginning of this killer lick here. See? So basically, you start off on this pickup. That's the little ringing the bell right there. Okay? So here we're in B flat. And then you're going to play this note 8 times, but you slide in, so you're doing it in groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then you play it one more time, but it's the beginning, it's the downbeat of the next bar. So that little lick right there, it's outlining a 7th chord, B flat 7 chord. And then he kind of hits kind of like an open or just a kind of a muted note, and then lands on the chord. And then he plays this kind of major lick that is kind of slidey. And then he goes into this lick and it's doing the same thing. It's kind of like the rhythm of it is, again, it's like the 3-against-4 kind of rhythm where you're accenting the upbeats. It's kind of like the shave. It's that rhythm shave. So you've got 16th notes or 8th notes grouped in threes. So it's kind of like... So when you do that, because you're basically accenting the upbeats, it sounds cool when you play it. But when you play it against a band or a drummer, it sounds way cooler because the beat keeps moving and cycling over that beat because you're playing in groups of 3. So that's a killer lick to do. It's kind of like, one way you can kind of practice that lick is, it sounds like a laser beam or something, right? Because you're holding your finger here and you do this really quick, we do a quick bend like that. And you can kind of hear, he's holding this finger down, so you kind of hear the overtones of that. So it's a really cool sound. And then basically there's one rest in there, and then you play the next note. So it's like bend, rest, pluck. So it's like that. So I'm gonna, instead of the rest, I'm gonna play a muted note so you can hear what I mean. So it's like this. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But because it's 8th notes, that's gonna be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So it creates this looping of the rhythm, which is super cool. So that's a great lick to get into, and it's the idea of that kind of rhythm. He's keeping this 8th notes going. Okay, so an interesting thing there as well is the way he ends that lick. That little lick right there, that's a crazy, awesome lick. So he's playing this in the late 50s. And this is basically the same, it's like a T-Bone Walker style lick, but it's just the same sort of thing you'd hear Stevie Ray Vaughan play when he's doing his signature lick. So it's the same kind of idea. He's got even the sweep in there. So you could make a whole career just out of that one little lick right there. But the whole idea there is there's a lot of cool things that he's cramming in there. But from many different accounts, he never played it the same twice. Like Roll Over Beethoven. Or... all these different ways of playing it, but in this instance on this video here when he's jamming with Keith and Eric, he's just playing it straight, so he's not using he's just going. So this time he's just playing straight 8th notes, 8 of them, and then he plays this cool little bend here where he's playing in the key of C. Gonna jump up to the minor 3rd there, and you kind of just bend up. And you play this kind of little choked note where you hit the note and then bend up so it squeals. Play it with an upstroke. And then you walk down the scale, basically outlining that same 7th chord. Now, check this out. This is really, really cool what he does here. The lick is basically this. You're going down a dominant 13 arpeggio. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's basically this. Great lick, right? But here's what he does. This is so cool. He plays it with an open A note. So instead of hitting the A there, he plays an open A here. So he goes like that. So he throws that open A in. So cool. Like Jimi Hendrix used to do that a lot. Just kind of throw in these. Just these kind of random open strings, which sounds so cool. And you can actually do it in any key. Oh dear. Anyway, that's a cool lick. That's the opening lick. So Chuck's saying, okay, let's jam. And he launches in, and within the first 20 seconds, he's throwing every lick in the book at Eric and Keith. So let's look at the next lick he plays. This is amazing here. Okay, so that lick right there, it's kind of like, it's this cool kind of repeated motif. So it's like the heartbeat of rock and roll, that right there, because it's that syncopated. There's this thing that happens in jazz and swing and rock and roll. It's this idea of going through the chord changes, but doing this like pedal tone where you've got this repeating motif that sits over the top of it. So it's kind of like... Now what happens is a lot of times, this was a really popular thing, even in the 1940s, they would play that little riff, but when they went to the 4 chord, they'd take the same riff and go minor, and then go back to major again. So to give you this sound. So you'd basically be going, and then for the minor, something like that. So basically over the 4 chord, whenever you're playing in a blues, when you go, say if you're playing a C blues, when you go to the F chord, that note there sounds great if you play the minor note, because it's in the chord. But when you go back to the 1 chord, it sounds great if you play the major third, or at least bend up to it. Which is what Chuck Berry does a lot. So it's a great little syncopated riff. Like that. You know, and you hear that riff all over. I mean, that's one of the Chuck Berry, archetypal Chuck Berry licks, but you hear it all over the place. I mean, that riff's given birth to so many like surf songs, like you hear it in Beach Boys songs, you hear it in all these rock and roll songs, and it just sounds so cool because it's got that syncopated... You know, and then he ends it with this double stop fourths. Okay, speaking of that, check out this next lick. This is fantastic. This is so cool. This is another Chuck Berry, archetypal Chuck Berry lick. What he's doing is these sliding thirds. Now, Chuck Berry used that all over the place. And these are great to get to know these. And you can kind of like, basically there's 2 shapes that you use. So like say on the 4th and 3rd strings, if we're in the key of C here, you can just kind of go up and the shapes are either 1 fret apart or 2 frets apart. And you can kind of use your ear to kind of figure out, which is the right ones. It's a kind of a process of elimination, but you just kind of figure out. Then you go to the next set of strings, the 3rd and 2nd strings, and this time the shape changes because of the tuning of the guitar, but it's either 1 fret apart or on the same fret. So you get this. And then you go up to the top set of strings and you get the same, back to the same original shape, 1 fret apart, 2 frets apart. Like that. And you can just kind of work out these shapes in any given key. And then what's cool is you can actually start to kind of build little scales around it where you go across the strings. So you can go like... And then you can even go up, go up to the next set here. And you can find all these cool licks, So stay in the key of E. And you can kind of get this kind of cool Tex-Mex sound, right? Which will be like... Or you can take it more rock and roll by adding in the flat 7, and you can hear the difference there would be like... And actually you hear Clapton playing that lick in a second. Let's listen to Clapton. He does so Chuck Berry plays all these killer licks, and then he signals, okay, Clapton, you give me some licks. And then Clapton jumps in with this. This is amazing. Listen to this. This is so cool. So he's doing those kind of 7th sounding sliding thirds. Like that. So that little scale would be... sounds great in any rock song. You can kind of... But then check out this what he does next. He goes from that. It's it's almost like the melody, the rock and roll melody you hear in a lot of songs. But then he does a classic Claptonism here. And then Chuck Berry's like licking his lips, going, "What are you doing there?" It's awesome. But yeah, so he jumps up. Let's see. And he goes to that. He's got this floating vibrato, right, where he kind of holds his arm steady here like this. And he gets this really sweet. Let me turn up a bit. This really fluid kind of vibrato, removing his hand here and playing, kind of using the arm to rotate the note. And then he does this killer lick here, right? Where he goes... Okay, so let me show you what's going on there. So Clapton, he jumps up here, and when you're playing a blues in C, you got your basic pentatonic scale here, right? And if you jump up 3 frets, you're in this little area here, right? It's the upper extension to the pentatonic scale. I like to think of it as the Albert King box, because it gives you those kind of like... So he jumps up there, does his killer vibrato, but then he jumps down 3 frets and plays the same little box. So that's a great little rule that you can learn there, is whenever you're playing anything in the minor pentatonic, just jump down 3 frets and you can play the same lick. And then jump down. And he goes back to the minor. So that's a good little trick to learn, basically. Take any lick you play minor and go down 3 frets. Alright, so next, check this out. This is hilarious. You got... What's going on here? It's amazing. It's like Keith Richards is playing and Chuck's... But okay, so what's going on is Keith is playing what I like to think of as the Chuck chord, which is this. And basically, Chuck uses that all the time, and it's just like if you're playing in the key of C, if you go up 3 frets here and you play this little shape here, it gives you this cool kind of dissonant sound. It's actually part of the 4 chord, like if you're playing an F7 chord. When you use it over the 1 chord, it gives you this kind of cool sound. Like Hendrix used that a lot as well. So, and the idea there is he's using these double stops. Keith did that a lot, right? He did that. So that's one of the sounds of rock and roll, is those kind of double stops. And, so much of the idea here is just this, you can see, like Chuck's right there, he's going, "Come on, Keith, give me that punch, give me that aggression, give me that power," But then he's also pulling the magic out of the, that creativity and that magic is giving me the magic.